Welcome into Cornhusker Connection Hangover Edition. Hangover's pretty good way to put it. Last night was a disaster. Holy smokes! It's almost like we could have absolutely expected that exact scenario to happen, but it is what it is. We'll get into that here shortly. We'll also talk about breaking news. Brett McMurphy dropped this morning that came across my desk. It's not even 9 a.m. and we got more realignment news. I thought we were done for the year. Silly me. The ACC is adding SMU, Stanford, and Cal Berkeley. We'll see how that goes. I have some thoughts. I'm going to laugh about it a lot. I think that's really fun. And then, of course, the Huskers played a football game last night. It is what it is. We'll talk about that. But also, this is the first time that we've had the show where after Wednesday, when the Nebraska volleyball team did something really special. If you have, obviously, if you're watching this show, then you've heard they sold out Memorial Stadium, 92,000 plus people, an international women's sports record. And when you think about every Olympic gold medal event, every volleyball game, every softball game, every World Cup game, and that record lives in Lincoln, and that's incredible. I'll tell you what, it's probably, and I don't want to get too swept up in the moment here, but it's probably the most pride I've ever felt as a Husker fan. I mean, it's so special to scroll my Twitter's feed and see like national people and national brands like ESPN and Bleacher Report, Stephen A. Smith. They're talking about Nebraska, and they're not just talking about how stupid this football program is and how silly it is and how what a disaster that is. But they're talking about this volleyball team. They're talking about Nebraska women's sports, and they're talking about them doing something so special that it's just so special to have the whole country look at us. And like I said, I don't want to declare it like this because I don't want to. I don't know if I'm still swept up in the moment, but it's so special, and it might be the most pride I've ever felt as a Husker. Now, of course, on the age of the internet, there's always going to be haters and losers who bash on it, and they either quantified it as we have nothing else better to do in Nebraska, we pity our women's sports and wanted to give them a bone, or it's somehow fraudulent in one way or the sense because how do you find 92,000 volleyball fans? What does that mean? But I think this is just the prime example of Husker Nation doing exactly what they do. They will show up in droves to support anybody in any sport who has chosen to be a Cornhusker. And the Nebraska volleyball team has excelled in their field. They're an elite basketball brand. They've been there for years. This isn't a surprise to anybody in Nebraska, by the way. Like, this was a huge accomplishment. Everybody's so excited about it, but this wasn't a surprise. You know, whenever it gets to like Final Four time in volleyball, Nebraska's in the thick of it. Nebraska goes pretty crazy. Like they don't have these crazy like parades like they do in like Philly when the Phillies win the World Series, but it's a big deal. We don't overlook how special this volleyball team is, and they've been working their way up to this. It wasn't just like, oh hey, let's play in a football stadium and see if that works out. No, they sell out the Devaney Center each and every game for I think they have like a 300 game sellout streak. Um, so that's amazingly consistent. And then they kind of branched up last year, did the CHI Health Center in Omaha when they played Creighton. They sold that out in a matter of minutes. And then, of course, this year they can't find a venue big enough. But like I said, this is just what Husker Nation does. Like they support Husker athletics like no other. And when you have the kind of pride and success that the volleyball team does, it doesn't matter what sport it is. If the softball team had this kind of success, if the baseball team had this kind of success, if the basketball teams had the success, if the women's basketball team has had this kind of success in the past, and it kind of garnered similar excitement and anticipation with Husker Nation. But this is what they do. You know, people on Twitter will try to discount the football sellout streak, but they still put 90,000 strong in that stadium, even when it's bitter cold in Memorial Stadium to watch a 3-win football team in November. Like they love the Huskers so much, and I don't know if a lot of people can wrap their heads around that. Like, there's no ulterior motive here. We're not just trying to falsely prop up women's sports. We're not trying to, you know, the whole goal wasn't to set a record just because we like setting world records. It's we wanted this so much for this volleyball team that we've supported for year in year out, and who work so hard to put Nebraska in such a positive light. And when you do that, Husker Nation will show out in droves as they clearly did, and it's so special. But like I said, on my Twitter feed, I see a couple of haters, and a couple of them kind of attributed this to some marketing gimmick. And first of all, they sold it out way quickly before the marketing campaign could really get underway. So that's not true. And then if it is just marketing and just a gimmick and just about breaking a world record, why isn't every school doing this? Why wouldn't any school want to set a world record as special as this? Or also, why isn't just literally one team doing this? Why isn't one team doing this? It's because they can't. Now you look at other passionate volleyball schools like Wisconsin and Penn State. Maybe they do. Maybe they have a chance to do something similarly special. But I don't know. You also look at a school like Iowa, and they're doing something pretty cool as well. They're doing a women's basketball scrimmage in Kinnick Stadium, and I anticipate they'll probably hit their maximum. I don't know what that number looks like, but it's a hard thing to do. So another thing that I thought was so special is that they wanted to make this such a moment of pride, not just for Husker athletics, but also for the state of Nebraska. They made a whole thing about volleyball day in Nebraska, not just about the Huskers. You know, they had opportunities for kids to meet the players, to get involved in the program, and like a pep rally the day before. They really wanted to engage the community and really wanted everybody to be a part of this, whether you're a volleyball fan or not, whether you're a Husker fan or not, whatever it is. It's just they want Nebraska to be a part of this. And I think the biggest example of that is they could have played anybody, right? Like there are way more enticing matchups that could have been had than Nebraska and UNO. Like, can you imagine having that game except be against a team like Texas, a team like Stanford, a team like Florida? But they didn't just want to go to the moon by themselves. They wanted to take schools like Omaha and Kearney and Wayne State with them, which was electric. Like I said, I'm just so proud to be a part of it, and so proud to see this excitement that I see internally, so much and so thoroughly that it's very special to see the word getting out there, and everything being so special with the Huskers. And then Thursday happened. Then Thursday happened. There was unfortunately a football game last night. Kind of get into that here. They lost to Minnesota 13-10, and I'm gonna start with my gut and what I feel, and I feel so torn, and I feel so disgusted with this football program. Um, I mean, Jeff Sims stunk. 3 picks, one in the end zone, one on a potentially game-winning drive that ended up costing you the game in regulation. All you have to do is not turn the ball over. Don't give them the ball back. We go to overtime. Short field. We have a kicker now, I believe in. I'll take those odds. I'll take those. Gabe Irvin in the red zone. I'll take those. I'll take it. But no, he stunk. What a disastrous debut for him. He had a couple of good throws, but I mean, really, genuinely, just like a few. Like, brutal stuff. Matt Rule was fine, I guess. I didn't see any major coaching blunders. There's some play calling issues in the fourth quarter, particularly that question to get the ball back with a touchdown lead. 10 minutes to go in the third quarter or the fourth quarter. And then you pass the ball 3 times for a total of 1 yard. That seems like a very Scott Frost-esque move. Feels very frosty. The offensive line hasn't gotten it together. you can kind of see the talent and see that they'll come together. Oh, no. I have optimistic takes. I'm not going to get into it. The offensive line stunk, especially early. Um, the defense gave up too much at the end. That cornerback got cooked in the end zone. That stunk. Minnesota came to play, and they have a first time starting quarterback coming in for Tanner Morgan. Big shoes to fill. Most winning quarterback in Minnesota's history, and they cooked him. They cooked him at first. They rattled him in the fourth quarter. I'm like, this kid can't do anything. But then he just kept getting after it. Eventually, Nebraska wore down, and he found his rhythm back, and that's the difference. He threw an interception on the potentially game-winning drive to then let Minnesota go kick a field goal and win in regulation. This feels like the same formula. This feels like the same kind of TV show archetype, just with different characters, right? Like how the Simpsons had like the dopey dad and the sassy wife and the smart kid and the dumb kid, and a couple of kooky side characters to go with it. And then every cartoon show and every animated show in America did the same format. They had Peter Griffin, they had Stan Smith, they had Bob from Bob's Burger, just dopey dads, and then sassy smart women. It's such a copy and paste kind of thing. And boy, I fall for it every year. After the Northwestern game, I gave up on Nebraska. Like, I'm done. I'm not doing this shit anymore. And this whole podcast started as entering the transfer portal podcast with Tyler Sprinkle. We were in the transfer portal looking for a new team, and it wasn't until the very end of the season where we're like, man, maybe Nebraska can get back. Maybe if they get this coaching hire right. I mean, they got Trev Alberts making the call. He's not going to get it wrong. Yeah. Too early to say if he got it wrong, but it feels like the same thing. The same thing. They play a fine football game for 50 minutes, and then the last 10 minutes comes out, and they lose in comic fashion. And that's the thing about this, is that like I said, if you had told me that they were going to lose on a walk-off field goal to Minnesota on the road, first ever game for Jeff Sims as a Husker, first ever game for Matt Rule as a Husker, I would have been like, oh, that's probably fine. And if it had been something like, I don't know, maybe 24-17, 24-20, where Nebraska has some good plays, they don't make many mistakes, Minnesota just makes another play or two at the end. Yeah, that's where these programs are. That's where these programs are. Minnesota's, and deep into the PJ Fleck era. They're clearly the more refined program over the last 10 years or so. We're going on 10 years of this shit. And then Nebraska's, starting all over, and so that's fine to me. I can live with that. It's just these one-score games, and I have to see another graphic about how many close games Nebraska's lost over the last few years, and now this is just another one, and that narrative continues. And this was such an easy opportunity. It's such a well-earned opportunity. The defense played great for most of the game. They really bent but didn't break. It felt like Minnesota was moving the ball at will. But then you look at the end of the first quarter, and they have 0 points. Or you look at halftime, and they got 3 points. They were really doing good. But it just feels like the same thing, which is heartbreaking. And I mean, I'm terrified of Jeff Sims now. What a stinker. What a stinker. I mean, this because here's the thing about Jeff Sims. I really liked this quarterback room last year. I liked Casey Thompson. He brought in a lot of experience. A lot like Jeff Sims does this year. But then you also have Logan Smothers, who's been with the program forever. And he got to play some in 2021. Played the whole Iowa game. Almost beat Iowa. Should have beat Iowa if it wasn't for a fluky blocked punt. You also had other talented guys like Chuba Purdy, who I guess is still there. And then you have Henrik Harburg, and you have, um, oh boy, what's the other guy's name? Oh man, I don't know. But you had a deep quarterback room where, you know, if things didn't work out with Casey Thompson or he gets hurt, like every Nebraska quarterback inevitably does because the offensive line stinks, you kind of get the same. You don't get a huge drop off in production, but a lot of those guys are gone now. So even if this Jeff Sims thing doesn't work out, and it's one game, I'm not. This is my cursed Husker fan, cynical worst case scenario. I have some optimistic takes about this game. We'll get to, but overall, he stunk. And it's not just like he missed a couple of throws or he wasn't in rhythm or he had a couple of balls fall, get tipped up 3 times and end up in the Gophers' chest. Those were horrible mistakes. I mean, inexcusable. Like throwing a pick in double coverage inside the 5-yard line. No awareness. Throw it over, throw it into the stands for all I care. Let let our new kicker get some reps in. Get some points on the board. There was only 23 points total scored this game. You don't think another field goal or two would have helped? Um, Man, that last drive, we're moving the ball. And hey, guess what? We don't have to move the ball. It's a tied football game. Just don't give them the ball, and we go into overtime. Do we win in overtime? I don't know. But do we win after throwing an interception and letting them kick a field goal? Definitely not. So, yeah, don't throw interceptions like that. And they're not good interceptions to throw. Like, it's it's very concerning. And this is week 1. But, man, what a stinker. He had some good plays running the ball, I guess. And I don't know why I have a theory why they went away from the zone read later in the game because you don't have any depth at quarterback anymore. Jeff Sims is going to get killed out there. He got hurt at Georgia Tech, and if you keep punishing him like this, he's going to get hurt again. But also, if you don't let him run the football, he stinks. He stinks. Brutal stuff. It just felt like the same story. There were some good moments. There was some good stuff going on. It is just the first game of the Matt Rule era, of Jeff Sims' time at Nebraska. There were some good things. The defense played really good the first half, really throughout the game until the very end. And I mean, when the offense can't stay on the field, defensive breakdowns kind of happen. But you know what this reminds me of? So I'm a Denver Broncos fan, right? It's tragic, I know, a Husker fan and a Broncos fan, but I'm getting very similar feeling to how I felt last year after their first game. They played Seattle on the road. First game with the new head coach, first game with the new quarterback. And they botched it. They botched it. Admittedly harder than Nebraska botched it on Thursday night. Because not only do they have 2 fumbles within the 5-yard line, they had some poor clock management towards the end of the game, elected to kick a 65-yard field goal instead of like trying to convert a 4th and 5 when Russ was moving the football pretty well. And they lose. And at the time, I was like, you know what? We got to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's the first game with the new coach. It's the first game with the quarterback. And they'll figure it out probably. And maybe. But they didn't. It snowballed into a disastrous season. Nathaniel Hackett might have been the worst head football coaching hired outside of Urban Meyer in NFL history. Couldn't even make it through his first season. He couldn't even get enough of any kind of good sentiment to make it to the offseason, to make it to the 17th football game. It was a disaster. And there's a scenario where it's the same thing here. And my theory with the Scott Frost era is that it wasn't that he was a bad coach. It wasn't that the players were bad. It's that they just never got their feet underneath them. They never figured out how to win. They could play football. They could play good offense. They could play good defense. They've been one of the best offenses in the Big Ten for a while. You'd think that would accidentally get you some wins. Not always. You got to figure out how to win football games. That's a totally different skill that Nebraska has been immune to over the last 5 years. That's the skill that the Broncos couldn't figure out last year. But if I'm going to tell you that things are different, and that's what I'm going to do now, things are different. This is the brightest timeline. We just went down the dark rabbit hole. Here's the brightest timeline. It's the first game. The kind of culture change that Nebraska needs, the kind of winning attitude makeover, installation, whatever it is, it can't be done in an offseason. You can't learn how to win football games in July and August. You got to just be able to go out there and figure it out. None of these guys have that ability yet. That's clear. They have a couple of opportunities here. By the way, I'm very much more worried about Colorado than I was going into last night. I thought that was a pretty given game. I'm not too sure anymore. We'll see how they look against TCU, but that has quickly become an absolute must-win game for Nebraska. And we'll certainly talk about that here going forward, but going 0-2, that's a tough thing to recover from. Even if you do win the next two against Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech, you just, if I'm selling you on the worst case scenario, it's going to go on the same. It's going to be the same thing. But Matt Rule is a specialist at instilling culture change and rebuilding programs. And the programs that he's rebuilt in the past, it's not just winning. It's, well, they can't play good football. They're actually genuinely bad football teams, which I don't think Nebraska is. He had to start from the ground up. He's got pieces here. I'm starting to think I also think we got to stop playing Big Ten games week 1. It's fun, it's exciting. We get these standalone games week 0 against Northwestern last year, Minnesota week 1 this year. We can't do that shit anymore. Don't give me a conference game to start the season. We're trying to rebuild here. You got to swap these games. I mean, play Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech first. Throw in a Colorado game there as a tune-up, and then get into Big Ten play. What's wrong with that format? Because here's the thing. I don't want the whole country watching Nebraska football anymore. It's embarrassing. We've been the laughing stock of college football for years now. After the game, I joined a Kansas State Twitter Spaces. By the way, we were supposed to go live on Twitter Spaces yesterday. I couldn't figure it out. I apologize. I was watching a Kansas State Twitter Space, and boy, they were clowning Nebraska. They were ruthless. Now, granted, Kansas State has some history seeing Nebraska, on top, and I wasn't necessarily around during these days, but I can imagine Nebraska as a fan base. They're not very good winners. I'll just leave it at that. So they particularly find a good amount of glee in watching Nebraska struggle, and that's fine. That's earned. But everybody else, like the whole country's laughing at us. The whole country's like, "Oh, hey, this is Nebraska football." I would like Nebraska football to be known for something that's not losing in hilarious fashion. But it is what it is. It is what it is. This week we'll break down the matchup with Colorado. I'm already very nervous about it. So I'll tell you what. If it comes down to quarterback play, and it comes down to Jeff Sims or Sir Sanders, after last night, no matter what Sanders can produce on Saturday against TCU, that's almost irrelevant to me after what I saw last night How do you how do you trust Jeff Sims even the slightest? And no, I'm not saying bench him because he's very clearly the only option that we have. Maybe if he's not the only option, I don't know why he got to play last night, but it is what it is. If it comes down to quarterback play, I'm not liking Nebraska, and I very well could. But nonetheless, some more realignment news coming down the pipeline from Brett McMurphy at 7:03 this morning. ACC will add Stanford, Cal, and SMU in 2024. The league's presidents got the required 12 of 15 votes to expand the ACC's football membership to 17 schools in 2024. This is my favorite part. This is so funny to me. It's so funny. SMU will not receive. Sorry, I literally woke up, got on this chair, got dressed, and I didn't even put in my contacts. I can't see right now, but also the glare from the glasses isn't ideal. And then started recording here. So the funniest part of this, SMU will not receive any media rights revenues for the first 7 years. Stanford and Cal will receive reduced shares. One reason ACC added Stanford, Cal, and SMU is ESPN's media rights deal with the conference allows ESPN to renegotiate if the league drops below 15 members. And with potential future departures of FSU and Clemson and North Carolina, who were the three schools who voted against expansion, ACC wanted to kind of hop on the Pac-4 schools while they could. By the way, super sad for Washington State and Oregon State. That's such a sad situation for them. They don't deserve this. I mean, man, Oregon State is actually a good football team, man. They were just coming back. So, thoughts and prayers to them. Also, and we've talked about this ad nauseum with conference realignment. This is so shitty logistically. This is the worst, by the way, because at least in the Big Ten, you have like I don't think they're doing pods, but at least you have like kind of a West Coast pod where USC can play UCLA and Oregon and Washington without leaving the West Coast per se. For like other non-revenue generating sports, like some of the women's sports, basketball, baseball, even softball. Um, but this one, you get one team. If you're Cal and you're not playing Stanford, you're at minimum flying halfway across the country to Dallas. And if you're not playing SMU, then you're going all the way across the country on a red eye flight, probably commercial. Imagine doing a Southwest Airlines middle seat flight across the country, doing a red eye, and then having to go play a soccer game the next day. What a disaster! I get it. You got to go where the money is, and it's seemingly a life raft. But man, what a disaster for the ACC. I guess and here's the thing, and here's the bottom line to all of this news here. It's money. It's all about money. It's always been about money. Always will be about money. And as long as money's driving these decisions, you're going to get these stupid choices like this. But I also hate that Scott Frost is trending on Twitter still. That's disappointing. Um, what a disaster, man. What a disaster. As somebody who lives in Dallas, I'm excited that SMU is finally getting into the power schools. I hope that they, can have success. I think it'd be pretty cool. Um, especially if they can keep on Florida State and Clemson. Well, because really, if you take away Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and I know folks are saying this about the Big 12, so I don't want to be that guy. But is it really a power conference? When you have like NC State and Pittsburgh in the conference championship, is that really Is that really power football? I don't know. I hope so, because the more conferences we have, overall, I think the better the sport is. But nonetheless, I think that's gonna wrap it up for me here. Obviously, a very heartbreaking and mourning kind of event here, but sad stuff. But we'll hopefully get going. And I think that if there's anybody that Nebraska could have realistically hired who could over time improve this losing culture, I think it's Matt Rule. So I'm not jumping off the cliff. Like last year, the feeling in my tummy is the same, but the overall sense of doom and gloom is a little bit different than last year. Last year was year 4, year 5 for Scott Frost. This was the year where there's no excuses to not put it together. You have an experienced quarterback, talented in Casey Thompson. You have a lot. You have NFL players. Trey Palmer's going to be wide receiver 2 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, you're just seeing Huskers blow up the preseason in the NFL, and it's crazy. So you had the talent, and you just can't figure it out. Matt Rule, well, I mean, he's here, whether or not it works or not. So it is what it is. I hope it works out. I believe it's going to work out, but overall, it is. Team. We're doing condensed versions next week. Of course, we have the podcast with myself, Tyler Sprinkle. I'll be back next week. Go Big 12 or Go Home, as well as Bookie Brook winning us a bunch of money. Oddly enough, he was the only one who was bold enough to pick Minnesota here today, but that'll do it. What a disaster for Nebraska. Hopefully, we'll get back to it.